What's going on? This is Theo Gremminger, a.k.a. the OG Fantasy. We're back at it. Week 7, waiver wire. This week is a little bit wild. We got injuries to deal with. We have the dreaded bye weeks. Anybody who's been watching these videos or reading my waiver wire column knows that week 7 is the one we had circled for a long time. Welcome to Bye-Mageddon. This is no joke. This is week 7, the nightmare week for fantasy managers. We're, practically here at the midway point. You need to get wins, and now you have to deal with Carolina, Cincinnati, Dallas, Houston, the New York Jets, and the Tennessee Titans on buys. So again, if you've been using Chuba Hubbard or Adam Thielen, not this week. If Jamar Chase is a big central piece for your fantasy lineup, not going to have him this week. CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard, nope. If you were using Nico Collins, no Nico this week. No Breece Hall this week. No Garrett Wilson this week. No King Henry this week. This week is a little bit of a mess. You have to scramble. Then you add in the injuries, and this week becomes a real challenge, real challenge for fantasy managers. But we got you covered here at Player Profiler. Bye weeks and injuries are not excuses. We got to find a way to win. We got to find a way to grind in these weeks and do well with our fantasy rosters. And I think this kind of week, if you're a competitive fantasy manager, these kind of weeks are awesome because it's not clean. It's not perfect. This is not week 1 where everybody's feeling good. This is week 7. And sometimes when you're able to analyze a situation and get a spot start out of a player you don't usually use, and you win the week, those are kind of like the rewarding weeks where if you're a competitive fantasy manager, these kind of weeks like you look forward to. So I'm excited about Bye-Mageddon. At least I'm telling myself that. We'll see how we feel on Monday after Monday Night Football about Bye-Mageddon. But, this is a fun week. There's a ton of names on the waiver wire. I went a little deeper than I usually do. Check out my waiver wire column on playerprofiler.com. Pretty much everything I talk about on this video is what you're going to read in there. Occasionally, we have a later update. That's the only difference really with the players I'm discussing. I like to look for players that are rostered in less than in 25% or less of Yahoo leagues. That's our threshold. So if I talk about a guy and I refer to him as a shallow league ad, then they're over that. I usually don't really talk about too many guys that are, 50% plus unless there's a reason to do so. But let's get started. Quarterbacks, a no-brainer ad if he's still available in your league. And apologies to the not in my league bro guys. Sam Howell. Sam Howell is still available in 62% of Yahoo leagues. He is quarterback 10 on the season. He's a locked-in top 15 quarterback rest of season. And I think after this week's waiver wire run, this is the last time I'm ever going to have to discuss him because I think Yahoo managers are going to push him to 50% plus, especially with these crazy amount of bye weeks. Then you have the potential streamers here. There's a chance in your league that Daniel Jones was cut. Daniel Jones was not playing well, and then, of course, missed this past week with a neck injury. He could be back. Tyrod Taylor is available still everywhere, not surprisingly. But Tyrod Taylor is available in 98% of Yahoo leagues. Daniel Jones is available in 56% of Yahoo leagues. Why am I talking about the disgusting Giants offense? Because the Giants are playing the Washington Commanders this week. And the Washington Commanders are the most generous defense right now. The one that we want to target for all of our quarterback streaming is the Washington Commanders. The Commanders have now surrendered 5 300 or more passing yard performances in a row. It is absolutely wild. They conceded another 300-yard passing performance to Desmond Ritter this past week. The Commanders won. And again, I don't think this gets talked about enough. Like, Washington is a complete train wreck when defending the quarterback position right now. They're giving up big chunk plays. People are attacking their secondary. And if you're in a jam this week, Daniel Jones or even Tyrod Taylor are considerations based on this matchup. I think that the Giants are actually going to pass very well this week. We're going to talk about a couple of Giants that I'll consider as flex plays a little later in this video. The real test to my Washington gets torn up by everybody theory is when they play the Patriots. That game's coming up, and that could be a really interesting one, like a rubber meets the road matchup. Derek Carr, he's available in 75% of Yahoo leagues. Carr just passed for a season-high 353 passing yards in New Orleans' loss to Houston. Besides week 5, this Saints offense just can't score. They've only cracked 20 points once, besides the beatdown of New England. But still, when we're looking at Carr, he's coming off a 350 passing yard performance, and his next 4 games are all positive fantasy matchups. Jacksonville, who just gave up a 300-yard passing performance to Gardner Minshew. Then you've got, pull this up, Indianapolis, Chicago, and Minnesota. That's his next 4. So I think Derek Carr and the Saints have a chance to kind of get their offense going. And I think it could start this week against Jacksonville. Jacksonville's been very generous to opposing quarterbacks in terms of the yardage department. A shallow league ad, Baker Mayfield is available in 72% of Yahoo leagues, and he'll be available in more because I think a lot of people are going to cut him this week after his poor performance last week against Detroit. But really, that whole Tampa Bay offense was completely beat down. It was a step up in class for Tampa Bay. But let's look at Tampa Bay. They're 3-2. Their 2 losses are to Philadelphia and Detroit. So the 2 of the better NFC teams just beat the hell out of them. But against everybody else, Tampa Bay's been fine. They have a positive matchup against a beatable Atlanta Falcons defense this week. It's a huge game for the Bucs, a chance for them to go 4-2, to stay right in the mix for the NFC South. I think Tampa Bay bounces back in a big way. Look for Baker Mayfield to bounce back. Mayfield has a 7-3 touchdown to interception ratio this season. He's been definitely a lot better than he showed against Detroit. Desmond Ritter, we talked about Washington's defense. Well, Ritter had a really good game against them. He passed for 3 interceptions, but when I say he has a really good game, I'm not talking real football, people. I'm talking fantasy football because that's why we're watching this video. So Desmond Ritter passes for 329 yards against Houston, and then he passes for 300 plus again against Washington. So back-to-back 300-yard performances. He had a ton of passing volume this week, a season high in pass attempts. And he has Drake London, who's starting to roll. Drake London, I talked about him in my 2-minute drill, fantasy musings article that dropped on Monday. Check it out on playerprofiler.com. Like, Drake London's ascending right now. Drake London is wide receiver 30 overall in PPR, but Drake London's starting to roll. With Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and now a resurgent Kyle Pitts, Ritter has the weapons, and they're starting to pass more in Atlanta. This is definitely takes a leap of faith to use Ritter, but I think he's absolutely a starter in Superflex and a guy we want to keep an eye on for streaming purposes. Josh Dobbs, again, another Superflex consideration. He's providing mid QB2 numbers. Last week, Arizona was completely shut down, and Dobbs still finishes with 41 rushing yards, and he adds 235 passing yards and a touchdown. He's exceeded all expectations as a starter in Arizona. Locked in Superflex starter for now. There's a chance that Arizona's offense completely falls off the rails if they move guys like Hollywood Brown and Zach Ertz as the season keeps kind of getting away from them. So Dobbs might be kind of a short-lived guy, but Superflex wise, we're starting Dobbs right now and we feel fine about it. Gardner Minshew had a poor performance with 3 interceptions against Jacksonville, but he finished with 329 passing yards. Again, he's a guy that's a Superflex starter. And the problem with Minshew, though, compared to the other guys I've just talked about, is it's a murderer's row defense-wise for him the next 2 weeks. Cleveland and New Orleans, these are defenses we want to avoid. We all saw what Cleveland did to Brock Purdy this week. He had a season low. Cleveland is a legit defense. We want to start adjusting our expectations when we go up against the Browns. For very deep leagues, let's talk about Tyson Bagent. Tyson Bagent's a very interesting player. undrafted free agent. He had a storied career at Division II Shepherd. It was interesting because Bagent had many opportunities to transfer up from Shepherd, but he wanted to stay there, finished out his career there, and ends up being an NFL quarterback and gets in the game last week and was not horrible, but not great. But he now has an opportunity because Chicago goes up against Las Vegas and the LA Chargers the next 2 weeks. The Chicago Bears signed Trace McSorley, so I don't know the extent of this Justin Fields injury. It's a thumb injury. He's definitely not ready. But Tyson Bagent, if you were in a very deep league, or if you're in a super flex league in general, just kind of grabbing these spot start quarterbacks, you never know what's going to happen. If you have the roster room, definitely make room for Tyson Bagent. Running backs. Let's talk about my guy, Tyjae Spears. I mean, I'm like contractually obligated to talk about him anytime I do a sleepers video, a waiver wire video. Tyjae Spears is a baller. He's still available in 52% of Yahoo leagues. I mean, what are people doing? Tyjae Spears should be rostered in like 80% of leagues right now. But if he's out there, go get him. Let's talk about Craig Reynolds. Craig Reynolds is available in 98% of Yahoo leagues. This is like, at first I was out. They pulled me back in. Craig Reynolds we had earlier in the year. Then we cut him. Now we're going to add him again because David Montgomery is going to miss time with a rib injury. I don't know how long it could be, but he's definitely not going to play this week. Jahmyr Gibbs has a hamstring injury. Jahmyr Gibbs could absolutely come back this week, but if he doesn't, Reynolds will see even more time. And Zonovan Knight is hurt. So Craig Reynolds is looking at 15-plus touches. I had Jim Coventry on press coverage today from RotoWire. He's very good with the projections. But I said 15 for Craig. He said 12 for Craig Reynolds. But any way you cut it, Detroit is a top 5 scoring offense, and Craig Reynolds is going to have double-digit touches in this offense. During a bye week hell like this week, Craig Reynolds is most likely a guy that you add and you put into your lineup. I think he could be a back-end RB2, high-end RB3 this week based on volume. And we got to remember, Craig Reynolds in 2021 had 2 RB2 or better weeks for the same Lions coaching staff. So Dan Campbell had Reynolds back then. Reynolds has been with Dan Campbell since his first year in Detroit, and Reynolds had those 2 weeks. I believe he had a third week where he was like a running back 3 as well. But 2 RB2 weeks in 2021. History could repeat itself this week in 2023. Now, my top ad right now is Elijah Mitchell. The 49ers used Elijah Mitchell sparingly because of his first game back from a knee injury. But Mitchell had more fantasy success in the Kyle Shanahan system and was playing ahead of Jordan Mason before Mitchell had a knee injury. So, like, if you look back at week 3, Mitchell's healthy. Week 3, Mitchell has his best game of the season against the Giants. Then Mitchell has the knee concern, finally comes back last week, and Jordan Mason runs ahead of him. I could be wrong on this one. I mean, Jordan Mason, we're going to talk about in a second, but I'm going to lean Mitchell because I believe that the 49ers coaching staff believes in Mitchell, and he will get more touches than Jordan Mason if Christian McCaffrey is to miss time. So I'm leaning Elijah Mitchell. I'm excited about getting him. Again, he's probably rostered in a lot of your leagues. He's only available in 72% of Yahoo leagues. So if you're in like an FFPC or an NFFC league, Mitchell's probably rostered, but go ahead and check for it. And then, hey, if you think I'm wrong, then it's Jordan Mason. And Jordan Mason absolutely has the recency bias here and the recent sample size of strong play. Mason has scored a touchdown in back-to-back weeks as the handcuff to McCaffrey. So Mason had the opportunity with Mitchell out, and Mason did well with it. He's done enough that I think this is going to be somewhat of a committee with him and Mitchell. But again, I would lean on Mitchell. If McCaffrey was out, I would lean on Mitchell being the one I'd want to have if both are available in your league. But I'm happy adding both of these guys. Again, I want 49ers on my lineup, and I want 49ers on my bench. San Francisco's averaging 30 points per game this season. They're number 2 only to the Miami Dolphins. So Mitchell and Mason, after this week, both of these guys should be rostered in a ton of places. Keep an eye on the injury reports with Christian McCaffrey. If your league has Wednesday waivers, that's great. Hopefully we get a lot more information from McCaffrey. But if your league has Tuesday night waivers, just be careful spending an unbelievable amount of money in Fab in case this situation goes south. Let's talk about Kareem Hunt. Again, Kareem Hunt's going to be rostered in a ton of leagues, but he's worth talking about because he's still available in 64% of Yahoo leagues. He had his best game since he came back to Cleveland. He saw a significantly increased role post-bye week. So he had 12 carries for 47 yards, and he had a 16-yard toss play touchdown from Harrison Bryant that was really, really a well-designed play. And Hunt also had a season high with 3 targets, and he caught all of them for 24 receiving yards. So Jerome Ford is probably a back-end RB2, high-end RB3 this week. But because of the bye week situation, Kareem Hunt is absolutely a guy you can flex this week. Both of these guys see an uptick as Cleveland leans on their running backs with PJ Walker behind center. Zack Evans. This is a really fun one. Evans Hive was buzzing this summer. 7th round pick out of Ole Miss. Evans has always had like a lot of like Devy take lock. This was a guy that was a huge recruit coming out of high school, went to TCU, transferred to Ole Miss, had played with NFL backs on both teams. He never really had like a smash season in college, but people really believed in the talent. Speed-wise, you're talking about like a mid 4.5s guy. I think he ran like a 4.55, 4.57, something like that. So he's got a little bit of burst to him. Caught some passes, not a ton, but he's capable of catching a couple of balls. When Cam Akers was moved to Minnesota, I wrote about Zack Evans in this waiver wire column saying this is a guy that we should go out and add. And I discussed him on these videos. Then Ronnie Rivers ends up seeing the work ahead of Williams. So the whole thing was messed up. Like we missed twice on we missed twice on Zack Evans. Was not a guy you could draft this summer. Was not a guy you could roster, and then was behind Ronnie Rivers. So you've already added him a couple times, and now he's going to be added again this week. He makes my top 10 overall. This is like a perfect storm. He had 4 carries this past week, and now with Kyren Williams set to miss at least a week and maybe more, and Ronnie Rivers set to miss probably a month, Zack Evans has a path to fantasy viability, and he's got a path as a short-term production guy this week against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is not as scary a matchup for running backs as they were in years past. There's also a chance that Zack Evans plays well enough that he moves ahead of Ronnie Rivers. It's not like Ronnie Rivers has some like Teflon profile where Ronnie Rivers is like insulated and locked into the RB2 spot. So Evans has a path to be a high-end handcuff to Kyren Williams, and he has a path to giving you fantasy viability this week alone. So he has a lot of paths. He's definitely worth some fab this week. It's going to be a very tilting game. Bear in mind that Royce Freeman is there, and he will be activated. So I always have like a little bit of fear in my mind that Sean McVay in a 1-week game, a game where the Rams defense should put them in a position to beat Pittsburgh, especially with Kupp and Nakua and Stafford. There's a chance that you see a little more Royce Freeman than you want. That's my fear. I wouldn't bet on it. I think it's a Zack Evans game, but keep that in mind. I think Evans goes for a decent amount of fab in some leagues, but I do think it's going to be kind of all over the place. So he's a guy that I want to at least price and force and not let my league mates get him for free. Devin Singletary. Got to be a little bit excited about adding Devin Singletary, but again, Houston is on a bye week this week. So there is we've got to look at our rosters and say, can I handle another 0? Because you have multiple guys on bye weeks. Then you also have players dealing with injuries. So to add a guy that's going to give you another 0, that's roster dependent. That's another reason why we're always trying to say be 2 weeks ahead on waivers. I know it's easier said than done. I certainly have some leagues where I'm still scrambling in this week, but we want to try to be 2 weeks ahead for this sort of situation. So this past week, a kind of a funny thing happened. This was the first week where we saw Devin Singletary get like the most work in the backfield. This coaching staff is new. They have no allegiance to Dameon Pierce, and Dameon Pierce has not run well. Devil's advocate, the Houston Texans offensive line has been injured. So there's this whole like counter argument that Dameon Pierce post bye week will bounce back. I don't know. Devin Singletary had a season high 12 carries for 58 yards. He also had 2 targets. Singletary is the one who, if there's a split, is going to get the targets. And if there's a somewhat even split in the carries and Singletary's getting the targets, then Singletary is a better weekly start than Dameon Pierce. That might sound a little bit crazy, but Devin Singletary has finished as RB30 and RB24 the past 2 seasons. He's a guy that NFL coaches give touches to. Last year, James Cook couldn't get anything going with Devin Singletary in Buffalo. Singletary was ahead of him the entire year. The year before, Zach Moss, who we all see like balling for Indianapolis this year, couldn't do a thing. Devin Singletary was ahead of him. So this was the guy that the Houston Texans coaching staff went out and got. Devin Singletary might be a better fit this year in Houston than Dameon Pierce. I have concerns about Dameon Pierce right now. We'll see post-bye week whether I'm right or not. Latavius Murray. So we all saw the really terrible injury with Damian Harris, his neck injury. Very scary thing. You hate seeing that. Just takes the wind out of your sails. I mean, certainly Buffalo's seen enough of these sort of injuries. You definitely don't want to see those, in a Monday Night Football game, but we have to react to it. Latavius Murray would obviously see a bump up with Damian Harris set to miss time. Murray was already playing ahead of him, but now Murray's going to see an increased role. You also have a fact that Murray is also cutting into James Cook's role. So Murray's role is like a lot more prominent than anyone could have imagined, and it's set to grow. Murray had a season high 12 carries and 45 yards this past week. He's also seen a significant amount of third down snaps, and he actually ran 13 routes, and James Cook only ran 15. So again, 15 to 13 on the routes run for Cook. It's not a good scene for James Cook right now. You've got James Cook. I think we've got to adjust our expectations and make James Cook into like a low-end RB2. The quality of the offense makes James Cook a start, but it's not ideal right now, especially with Latavius Murray getting a little bit of time. But Murray's a guy that we want to add to our rosters. Murray, if you're in a complete jam, you can put him in. You don't feel great about it, but he's got contingent upside if Cook were to miss time. Murray definitely has a path to fantasy viability there. Keon Ingram. So quick shout out to the Arizona Cardinals beat reporters. Get it together, man. Damian Williams ends up getting time last week. Nobody talked about that. We don't hear one single Arizona Cardinals beat reporter saying, look for Damian Williams this week. I get it. Teams can be secretive, but do your job, man. Let us know about that kind of stuff. Us fantasy managers need those edges. Keon Ingram ends up dominating the Arizona Cardinals RB touches. And DeMercado, again, was kind of a zero. DeMercado, it's tough, man. He ends up, the second half, they had the game flow potential, and he still doesn't see work. So he ends up playing the most snaps of any Arizona Cardinals running back. But Ingram's the one that if you're in a complete jam and desperate this week and you have to use an Arizona running back, Ingram's the one. His output was nothing special. He had 10 carries and he caught 2 passes. Both of those were season highs. Ingram is more of a depth piece and a desperation dart throw right now. But with this many teams on a bye, I don't know your situation. Keon Ingram, you might have to start and kind of hold your breath. Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller's production sharply declined from week 5, but I think he remains kind of a handcuff running back to Alvin Kamara. Jamal Williams could be back, so keep an eye on this one. But Kendre Miller is available in 84% of Yahoo leagues. He's a guy that I believe in as a talent. Jamal Williams could make the whole situation a little bit messy. So don't go spending a ton on Kendre, but he's a guy that you can get for cheap in a lot of leagues right now. Salvon Ahmed. Jeff Wilson was my number 1 waiver wire ad last week, and then he couldn't get it together and play this past week. So Jeff Wilson is obviously still dealing with some injuries, but Ahmed filled in fine. This was obviously Raheem Mostert's smash game. Mostert looks like the league winner right now, but Ahmed played well, and he had one of the best fantasy performances of his entire career. He had 23 rushing yards and he scored a rushing touchdown. And he also had 5 receptions. That's what you like about his game is he can catch the football. Don't go overpaying for Salvon Ahmed because Jeff Wilson could be there this week against Philadelphia. What a game. Miami versus Philly. That's going to be a great game. But Salvon Ahmed's the kind of guy you could roster. Right now with Devon Achane missing, with Jeff Wilson still a little banged up, and Raheem Mostert getting like a ton of volume, Ahmed has contingent upside. If you're in deep leagues, hold on to him or add him. He's available right now in 79% of Yahoo leagues. And if Wilson misses time again, Ahmed, like because of the quality because of the options this week with 6 teams on bye, Ahmed might have to be used again. Tank Bigsby available in 83% of Yahoo leagues. High-end handcuff. Travis Etienne looks incredible. Tank Bigsby would be the backup there if Etienne were to miss time. Keyshawn Vaughn, backup. Saw a little uptick in usage behind Rachaad White. Over the past 2 games, Vaughn has 18 touches. He's the handcuff, not Sean Tucker right now. Rico Dowdle, again, handcuffed to Tony Pollard, lottery ticket. Royce Freeman. Royce Freeman, we talked about a little bit earlier. Royce Freeman's just the kind of guy to, grab on your bench just in case. Again, Ronnie Rivers is going to miss some time. We expect Kyron Williams back. We expect Zack Evans to be the number 2 running back. But, adding Royce Freeman for a 0% bid, $1 bid, just to see what happens. If you have the roster room, do it. Probably going to be a 0 here. But I just want to mention him. Wide receivers, really, really fun week. Everyone, if Rashee Rice is available in your league, go get him. Spend fab to get him. Rashee Rice is going to happen. But most of you, he's going to be rostered. He's still actually available in 55% of Yahoo leagues, which is a little bit surprising. I think he's going to be really a player we have in our lineups the entire second half of the season. Shallow league ad, another guy who's going to be rostered in a lot of leagues, but he's worth mentioning because he's available in 65% of Yahoo leagues, is Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel now has 3 straight weeks of 14 PPR points or more, and he looks good. If Jahan Dotson was having this sort of fantasy production that Curtis Samuel was having, people would be freaking out. But Dotson has been an absolute dud and a huge ADP disaster, and Samuel has been like found money. He is second in receiving yards and receptions on the Washington Commanders to only Terry McLaurin. Curtis Samuel is a guy you're going to flex again this week. Again, he scored a touchdown in 3 straight weeks, and he's had 14 or more PPR points in 3 straight weeks. The 2 weeks prior to this week, he had 18 points or more. So Samuel is doing very well. Again, we know him. This is a guy who we've seen him a lot in his career, so it's a little less exciting than kind of like an unknown upside addition. But Samuel, you know what you're getting. Samuel, you're going to play him until the production falls off. Shallow league ad, Rasheed Shahed. I'm really excited about this one. Rasheed Shahed is still available in 68% of Yahoo leagues. Again, it's a little bit surprising that he's only rostered in 32% of Yahoo leagues, but I think he'll see a really big bump up after his strong performance. He finished with 85 receiving yards and a touchdown, and they also gave him 2 rushing attempts. Shahed is an explosive player with big play potential. He had a 34-yard touchdown reception, and then he also had a 51-yard reception in the fourth quarter. So, like, his usage is inconsistent, but he's an upside flex. Anytime you throw Rasheed Shahed in the flex, you know it's not a floor play. You know it's an upside swing for the fences play. But guys like that are very valuable. Those are the kind of guys that can flip a matchup. When you look at a Sleeper or a Yahoo or an FFPC, and they show you the projected winner of the week, and I have a team that maybe is projected to lose by 10 or 15 points, I love throwing in a guy like Shahed and swing for the fences. They can flip a matchup and they can flip a percentage when a guy like that goes off, like you saw with his big play potential. And I love that they're giving him rushing attempts in some games. Another shallow league ad. Shout out to the Not in My League Bro guys. Josh Downs, I know he's rostered in your league, but he's still available in 67% of Yahoo leagues. Continues to produce. He caught his first touchdown of the season, and he had 8 targets this past week. Minshew loves downs, and also Michael Pittman sees a big uptick, when Minshew's behind center. Another Colt to monitor is Alec Pierce, who suffered a shoulder injury. If Pierce is going to miss a bunch of time, then Downs and Pittman will see even more work. There's rumors that the Colts are going after Jerry Jeudy, and I think that would make sense because they don't have like any pass catchers. But Downs and Pittman stand out not only because their availability as, legitimate NFL pass catchers, but also because they're playing very well. I wrote the waiver wire column before Monday Night Football. I had Quenton Johnson in there. Guys, Quenton Johnson, tough sledding. Not seeing the usage spike up post bye week is a really bad sign for him. Shout out to Jackson Smith and Jigba managers. JSN saw a nice uptick. So I'll have that discussion with Billy Muzio this week on First Class Fantasy. But JSN is ticking up. Everybody knows I have a bet with Billy on JSN for the season production. It's not looking good, but second half of the season, I think JSN could look pretty good. Michael Wilson is still available right now in 77% of Yahoo leagues. He had his worst game of the season in week 5, and then he rebounded last week with 62 receiving yards. He's had 56 or more receiving yards in 4 of his last 5 games. He's got contingent upside as his role should grow, and he would be Arizona's wide receiver 1 if they trade Hollywood Brown. Rondell Moore would get, more manufactured touches, but it would really be Wilson, their 3rd-round pick out of Stanford, that I think would see his role really grow if Hollywood Brown is traded. Michael Wilson's a guy I like to roster. Second half of the year, you're going to be happy you have Michael Wilson. Immediate guy, a guy you could start this week, is Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne, I had in my Sleepers video and my Sleepers article last week, and he made me look smart. He had his best fantasy performance since week 1. He finished with 10 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown in New England's loss to Las Vegas. Loss to Las Vegas. Try saying that 10 times in a row. But he had 89 receiving yards, a touchdown, and 10 catches, and he had a tie for his season high in targets with 11. You're never excited about starting Kendrick Bourne, but he has 44 targets on the year, and the Patriots are absolutely desperate for playmakers. Again, we have New England going up against Washington soon. Kendrick Bourne might feast in that one, so keep an eye on Kendrick Bourne if he's on your waiver wire. Strong ad this week. Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson's a guy that I continually have talked about, and the production really hasn't been there, but he had a very promising usage this week. He had 8 targets. He caught all of them, and he had 62 receiving yards. Robinson is starting to get healthier, and he's displaying some of the traits that made him a 2021 second-round pick. He has flex appeal against the Washington Commanders this week in a matchup-based flex dart throw. Wan'Dale could catch another 8 passes. There's also a chance they give him a manufactured run or 2. So, again, we're not excited about starting any Giants pass catcher, but we got to talk about him because we're going deep this week. Jaden Reed, available in 80% of Yahoo leagues, coming off of a poor performance in week 5. Worst game he's had all year, but Green Bay could self-scout and change some things up post-bye week. Again, Green Bay got demolished by Detroit. Bear in mind that kind of game is going to make teams kind of change their approach a little bit, and they're going to potentially self-scout, and you might see some different usage post-bye week for Green Bay, excuse me. So Jaden Reed's a guy that I want to stash on my bench. Again, we like Jaden Reed at Player Profiler. Darius Slayton, again, another Giants pass catcher, nothing exciting, available in 98% of Yahoo leagues. Led New York in receiving yards in week 6 against Buffalo with 69 receiving yards. Desperation flex in an appealing matchup. A longer-term play at the wide receiver, if you want a stash, New York Giant Jaylen Hyatt. Jaylen Hyatt has speed for days, really fast player, and he had season highs in targets and catches this past week. This could be a trend, and again, the Giants are desperate for playmakers. Trey Tucker, very deep league managers and dynasty league managers. Trey Tucker is starting to get playing time. This is a 3rd-round pick out of Auburn. He has speed, and Hunter Renfrow, the Raiders are looking to Tucker. Bateman again. He was the second biggest. Right now he's the second biggest threat among all Baltimore wide receivers behind Zay Flowers. He's a stash to kind of see where this thing is going. If Beckham, you really need Beckham or Rashad Bateman to miss time to use Aguilar, but depending on your league size, some of you play 14 teamers, some of you play in very deep formats. Aguilar should be rostered in very deep formats. Tight ends. My favorite tight end this week. My favorite tight end addition is Michael Mayer. Luke Musgrave is available in a lot of leagues as well. We'll talk about him in a second. But Michael Mayer is a must-add player for tight end premium managers in FFPC leagues and in regular PPR leagues. Mayer was the third tight end selected in the NFL draft behind Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta. He had a huge career at Notre Dame. And Mayer was like an afterthought at the beginning of the season. He ends up getting 2 targets the first 4 weeks of the year. And now he's seen a significant uptick. Very weird usage for the Raiders to not use him at the beginning of the year. But, no one's ever accused Josh McDaniels of being some coaching genius. Michael Mayer caught 2 passes in week 5, had 39 receiving yards. Looked good. Then week 6 comes along, and it looks even better. Mayer led Las Vegas with 75 receiving yards, and he had a career highs of 6 targets and 5 receptions. So a 5-catch, 75-yard game for a rookie tight end is very promising. Mayer could be like this year's Pat Freiermuth in 2021 or Chig Okonkwo in 2022. Guys that we didn't start in the first half of the year, and then at some point they become starters, and they're rookie tight ends we can use. I think that Mayer is a fun bet to have in the second half of the year, and if you're completely jammed this week, absolutely start Mayer. He's a top 10 ad for me this week. Luke Musgrave, I talk about him every single week. He's still available in 81% of Yahoo leagues. He could see a post-bye week bump in usage. He's coming off of a 7-target, 6-catch game. Again, the yardage wasn't great, but we cannot ignore that sort of production that we saw with Musgrave in week 5 before the bye week. So you can argue for Musgrave ahead of Mayer, but I'm going to go Mayer ahead of Musgrave because I think there's a little less. Let's say that the target tree is very kind of settled. I think in Las Vegas right now, it's Adams, Myers, Jacobs, and now Mayer. Green Bay, it's a little bit up in the air. You could see a big spike for Christian Watson. You have Romeo Dobbs. You obviously have Jaden Reed, who we just talked about, and you have Aaron Jones coming back from injury. So the weekly targets, I think, might be there for Mayer, a little bit more for Musgrave, but Musgrave's still a fine ad. We got to talk about him again, guys. I talked about him last week. I don't love talking about him, but right now your tight end 9 overall in PPR is Jonnu Smith. It's like a Bizarro World vibes. Back-to-back strong weeks for Kyle Pitts, and Drake London is like balling, but Jonnu Smith remained relevant. This was the lowest target total he's had in weeks, but he still caught a touchdown. He's caught at least 4 passes in every game for 5 weeks straight. This may be like a long-term fade, but he's a high-end tight end 2 for now. So if you're in a jam this week during bye week hell, Jonnu Smith. Taysom Hill. This one was super interesting. Juwan Johnson missed another game with a calf injury, and Hill saw a dramatic increase in targets and catches. He finished with 7 catches for 49 yards and 8 targets. That's kind of wild for Taysom Hill to see this sort of usage, but he caught the passes, and he got 49 yards. And the thing that would be interesting about Taysom Hill is on any given week, they can decide to give Taysom Hill, carries. He saw less carries this week as we saw the usage as a receiver go up. But if he can offer us anything in the receiving department and have that threat as a runner, he is not like a plug and play tight end. He's more of a plug and pray tight end. But he's the kind of guy that I want to add for like $1 or a 0% bid just to see if this usage starts ticking up. Again, New Orleans can't score points. So getting Taysom Hill involved and getting him the ball in his hands in different ways could be more than a 1-week thing, or it could be a complete blip on the radar screen. But I don't think your league mates are going to be spending up for Taysom Hill this week. So you might be able to get him for literally nothing. Trey McBride, dynasty managers and deeper league managers, keep an eye on Trey McBride. Also, managers who have had Zach Ertz and been using him. Trey McBride, a lot of his production was in garbage time, but he led Arizona with 62 receiving yards. This was a 2021 second-round pick out of Colorado State, incredibly productive player in college. But again, he's been playing behind Zach Ertz. But for the first time this season, he's tied him in the number of targets. McBride has several outs to fantasy viability. Arizona could utilize him a lot more and kind of see what they have. Or Arizona could trade Ertz to a contender and just use McBride. This is a popular player, again, for dynasty managers. You might want to kick the tires and see if people are not attached to McBride, because if Ertz is traded, I think McBride could be like a top 15 tight end the rest of the season, and he could be very interesting. Again, you need Ertz out of there to see weekly viability, but McBride does have the draft capital, and this past week he produced. Breaking glass in case of emergency tight end floor play is Tyler Conklin. He's had at least 4 targets in every game with Zach Wilson as starter. Breece Hall coming on really hurts Conklin in terms of giving like a secondary target. Again, when we attack these tight ends, we want guys who are going to be top 2 targets. Breece Hall right now, Breece Hall they're going to get the ball to, and Garrett Wilson's number 1. Conklin is just a jag, but again, he's had at least 4 targets in every game with Zach Wilson as starter. You know your needs. If you're in a complete jam, consider Tyler Conklin. 2 weeks ago, he had 60-plus yards receiving in the Jets' win over Denver. Came back to earth this past week, but the Jets got a big win over Philly. Kylen Granson. Granson finished with 67 receiving yards. He's in the concussion protocol, but if he plays, he could be like a low-end tight end 2. All Colts pass catchers get a bump up with Minshew. The top 10. My overall top 10 was difficult this week, and I could have gone a number of ways with it. But I prioritized Elijah Mitchell as number 1, Craig Reynolds as number 2. I'm a little bit ahead of consensus on Craig Reynolds, so if you disagree with me, there's plenty of players below Craig Reynolds on this list. But I just like Craig Reynolds for his 1-week viability in a top-end offense, getting volume. Michael Mayer, number 3. Rest of season stash, potential usage this week. High second-round pick in the NFL draft. Talented player, Michael Mayer. Number 4, Josh Downs. If he's still available, go get him. Number 5, Curtis Samuel. Still available, go get him. Number 6, Zack Evans. We talked about him earlier. There's a little bit of risk there, but very much like Reynolds, he's going to offer you at least a 1-week situation with potential for more. Jordan Mason in there at 7. You could make an argument for Jordan Mason to be in the top 2, but for me, he's number 7. Rasheed Shahed at number 8. Devin Singletary at number 9. Singletary would be a little bit higher if he was not on bye. And Latavius Murray at number 10. Check out my waiver wire article on playerprofiler.com. Check out these videos every single week. I also drop a fantasy takeaways article called the 2-minute drill that drops on Mondays, with my biggest fantasy musings of the entire weekend. And I'm going to drop a video on that as well. That should drop probably tomorrow. And then I drop a sleepers video, which we ran pure last week. My sleepers all, for the most part, gave some really good performances. It's going to be harder to do a sleepers video this week, but we're going to give it a go. So check out all my videos here. Check out press coverage. Check out First Class Fantasy. Check out the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast. Check out the GOAT District. And stick with us here at Player Profiler. We want to see you win leagues. We want to see you win a lot of money.